Good morning. Welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill, Unitarian Universalist. My name is Don Katahdin, and I'm a member of the Worship Associates Ministry. I especially welcome any visitors or newcomers in our church this morning and call your attention to the special note for you on the back of our order of service, welcome guests and newcomers. I'd also like to welcome those of you attending online. Lyrics to hymns may be found on the live stream screen, and a complete order of service is available in the link in the Sunday email and on the church website. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived at this beloved place, you are welcome here. As a congregation, we are requiring masks during the 9:30 church service and religious education programs. However, masks are optional during the 11:15 church service and the religious education programs at 11:15. Masks are optional outdoors and during the in-person Sunday social held immediately following the service. The online Sunday social is hosted by Rachel Rose and will be held at 1 o'clock. The Zoom link is in the weekly announcements and the Sunday morning email. Please turn off or silence any cell phones during our service to maintain a worshipful experience. I now call on Brenda Rogers to tell us about Share the Plate.
Good morning. I'm Brenda Rogers, and I co-chair the Share the Plate committee. And do you have a passion and a commitment to a cause and an organization? If so, then consider applying for Share the Plate. These are the Sunday morning collections that support our outreach ministry of our congregation. On many Sundays, our members make passionate presentations urging us to support nonprofits that provide services to our community, both locally and more widely. You hear their stories and you respond very generously, for which we are grateful. Committees and members of the congregation committed to these causes and organizations that align with our congregation's mission are encouraged to submit applications this April 30th, remember the date, for July through December of 2023. Our committee then will review the applications on May the 2nd and assist the sponsors in carrying out the steps in the collection. For more information about the application process, come to our table after the service. As Cecilia Warshaw says, Share the Plate is good for our church and faith to be better known outside our walls for actions and values, good for congregation members to be aware and feel a part of helping the wider community in a way that is simple and easy, and good for our church ministries. There's nothing more rewarding than supporting good causes through our service and our resources. We invite you to join our committee and feel the satisfaction of carrying out our mission of financially supporting worthy causes. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Our opening hymn this morning is the South African freedom song, Freedom is Coming, number 1035 in your teal hymnal. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and sing out.
Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, freedom is coming. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, freedom is coming. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, freedom is coming. Oh, yes, I know. Oh, yes, I know. Oh, yes, I know freedom is coming. Oh, yes, I know. Oh, yes, I know. Oh, yes, I know freedom is coming. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Freedom is coming. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Freedom is coming. Oh, yes, I know.
Imagine a line that runs from Moses to Harriet Tubman and to all the conductors on the Underground Railroad leading the enslaved out of slavery. Imagine a line that runs from the Israelites crossing the Red Sea to the protesters crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. No easy walk to freedom. Imagine a line that runs from Moses to Judy Heumann and to all who fought for disability rights. A line that runs to the drag queens at the Stonewall Inn in 1969, that runs through to people rising up for Black lives, for climate justice, for gun control, for democracy. Imagine a line that runs to you. Come, let us worship together. You will find the words for our chalice lighting in your order of service. If you wish to do so, please join me in reading them. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom.
Daylight again, following me to bed. I think about 100 years ago, how my fathers bled. I think I see a valley covered with bones and blue. All the brave soldiers who cannot get older, they're asking after you. Hear the past crawling from Armageddon's side, when everyone's talking and no one is listening. How can we decide? find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down. Lay your body down.
Each week we hold in our service a time for sharing the joys and the sorrows that we bring with us into this congregation. It's during this time, if you've come with either a personal joy or a personal sorrow, that you're invited to come forward, place a stone in the bowl, speak your name, and say briefly your joy or your sorrow. Let us enter into this time of tenderness and trust. Are there any joys and sorrows this morning? I see Nancy's got one.
My name is Nancy Mayer. Sorry. My name is Nancy Mayer. Back in November, they were planning my 50th high school reunion, and I said, sure, I'll go. Did everything I was supposed to, and then a month later, well, a little less than a month later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was not at all sure I was going to be able to make it. When I spoke to my radiation oncologist and said, I really want to go, she said, we'll be done by then, and she was right. And I made it to my 50th high school reunion this last weekend, and I'm so grateful I was able to be there.
My name is Frans Verhagen, and 2 days ago, my sister Mia died in the Netherlands. She was 84, and her death was an event of high dignity. She and her family planned her death together, and they were able to take leave from her. And before she was led to the bedroom where she got her injection. So she died peacefully. This was different 3 years ago when my spouse died in Caroline Meadows, and where this kind of medical assistance in dying was not available. And so I looked at the UUA website this morning to see to what extent the UU is engaged in this particular issue, because I think it's very important that all people be given the opportunity to die with dignity. And so there is an organization called Dying Rightly in NC, northcarolina.org, and they are advocating and pushing the legislature to follow a couple of other states in legislating this MAD so dying and dignity legislation. Thank you.
My name is Rachel Rose, and I have a sorrow to share with you today. Some of you may recall our wonderful staff member, Elizabeth Allure. She has 3 daughters, and their father was killed in a bike accident last week. So please hold Elizabeth and their 3 children in your hearts.
A final stone is placed this morning for all those joys and sorrows that we hold in our hearts that were not spoken. I invite you to join with me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. On this Palm Sunday, when Christians the world over prepare for the Holy Week, on this week as we look forward to Passover, celebrated by Jewish people the world over, as we enter into April, Earth Month, we look forward to the full emergence of the spring. We bring our hearts, we bring our lives, we bring our stories to this place. We are grateful for recovery and healing, even as we hold in our hearts all those who struggle with illness. We hold those we've loved and lost in grief. We recognize the ways our lives ripple out in connection, connecting us with friends and family, communities, in this world of which we are a part. We ask for courage in our living. We ask for the strength of our hearts to open in understanding and in compassion to all. And we ask for a sense of peace to come to us and swell among us in our living. Amidst the joys and the sorrows of this congregation, and amidst the stirrings of our own hearts, let us hold together a time of silence. I invite you to be still with me. Amen. We're going to sing our next song of the morning. It is Dona, Nobis, Pacem, and Eric will introduce how we're going to do it.
So I'm going to ask the choir to join me on this. Firstly, I'll play it through once as an instrumental, and please just listen and be meditative. And then we'll sing it together once, and then we'll break into the three parts. First part over there, second part in the middle, where however you want to define that, and the third part over here. Okay, twice through as the canon.
Dona, Nobis, Pacem, Pacem. Dona, Nobis, Pacem. Dona, Nobis, Pacem. Dona, Nobis, Pacem.
Our responsive reading this morning by Desmond Tutu is number 593 in the gray hymnal. You're invited to read out loud the italicized text. Liberation is costly. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, they had to travel through the desert. They had to bear the responsibilities and difficulties of freedom. There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining. They complained that their diet was monotonous. Many of them preferred the days of bondage and the flesh pots of Egypt. We must remember that liberation is costly. It needs unity. We must hold hands and refuse to be divided. We must be ready. Some of us will not see the day of our liberation physically, but those people will have contributed to the struggle. Let us be united. Let us be filled with hope. Let us be those who respect one another. Freely we have received gifts that minister to our needs of body and spirit. Gladly we bring to our church and its wide concerns a portion of this bounty. If you wish to donate online, the information is on the church website. We will now receive the morning offering.
I knew how it could feel to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I could say. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart. Remove all the bars that still keep us apart. I wish I could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree every man should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things I can do. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I'd sing, 'cause I'd know how it feels to be free.
Thank you, Eric. I'm so grateful for you leading us in the music this morning. This week, I think on Wednesday night, marks the beginning of the Jewish festival of Passover, when Jewish people celebrate and commemorate and retell the story of the Exodus from Egypt, the story of the Israelites led by Moses demanding freedom from Pharaoh, the story of hard-hearted Pharaoh refusing to free the captive Israelites and being afflicted by a series of dreadful plagues, the story of Moses leading the Israelites to the Red Sea and then miraculously across or through the Red Sea and out of Egypt, and the story of the Israelites having escaped from Egypt, wandering in the desert for 40 years before, at long last, finally reaching the Promised Land. The story of Exodus is a particular story, the ancient story of a particular tribe in a particular geographic area at a particular moment in history. But it's also much, much more than that. It's also a universal story. Anytime a people stand up for their own liberation, their own freedom, anytime a person stands up and demands, "Let my people go," anytime an oppressor is compared to hard-hearted Pharaoh, anytime we're asked to leave the world of the familiar that does not serve us and cross into some new and unfamiliar world that is yet to be, we are reliving the Exodus story. The Exodus story has a particular connection with the African American experience. The struggle against slavery and later the struggle of the civil rights movement were inspired by and imbued with imagery from the Exodus story in the Hebrew Bible. Thus, wade in the water became not only about wading into the Red Sea, but it also became about crossing the Ohio River into the north. In thinking about Passover this year, I was drawn to think about Archbishop Desmond Tutu and his reading from our hymnal, "Liberation is Costly," in which he connects the South African struggle against apartheid with the Exodus story from the Hebrew Scriptures. "Liberation is costly," he writes. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, they had to travel through the desert. They had to bear the responsibilities and difficulties of freedom. There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining. They complained that their diet was monotonous. Many of them preferred the days of bondage and the flesh pots of Egypt. We must remember that liberation is costly. It needs unity. Unitarian Universalist minister Kathleen McTeague retells a portion of the Exodus story this way, quote, "When the escape from Egypt was certain, when the last furious wave had closed over their enemies' heads and the dangerous waters lay smooth again, when the Israelites could finally turn toward the future without fear that the past would snatch them back, what did they see before them? Not the promised land flowing with milk and honey, but the wide and terrifying wilderness that would claim them for 40 long, hard years of wandering. They were not carried along on a surge of vindicated faith, but stumbled forward with paralyzing doubts. And instead of enjoying sweet unity, after all they've been through, they were torn by bickering and division. They walked into relentless uncertainty and discomfort and fell asleep on the hard ground to wake feeling ashamed for dreaming of the easier life of slavery they had left behind. And this morning, what I'd like to do is offer a few meditations related to this part of the Exodus story. There's going to be 3 of them. The first meditation I call a meditation on whining. I'll admit something, which is that I've always been particularly struck by one part of the Exodus story. The whining, complaining, and bickering of the Israelites after they've left Egypt. The community threatening to fracture under pressures that they face. You know me, I can't help but read the Exodus story as a story of leadership and inherently as a story of religious leadership. Now, I'm not Moses, and we all are not Israelites wandering in the desert, but we're also a congregation, a community, a people trying to get to our own promised land, perhaps, or trying to bring our world, or at least our small corner of the world, ever closer to that promised land that we imagine. I'm not Moses, and we're not the Israelites wandering in the desert. But part of leadership and part of reality is dealing with the complaints that we have in the community. In the story, it occurs to me that we can choose to see the complaints of the Israelites as ungrateful and entitled, or we can choose to see the complaints as a reasonable response to stress, hardship, struggle, and fear. There's complaining about being free, and then there's complaining about starvation. What's that advertising slogan for a candy bar? You're not yourself when you're hungry, right? Part of me just wants to give those Israelites a Snicker bar. There is this trope that appears and reappears again and again and again in Scripture. It's the trope that goes, food is scarce, look, there is enough. The Israelites are starving in the desert and complaining one moment, the next moment, manna from heaven. The crowd of 5,000 is hungry. When they go to hear Jesus speak, multiplications of fishes and loaves. The wine runs out at the wedding at Cana, water to wine. I could write like an article on this trope that reoccurs through the Scriptures. But I find that there is this idea that what might be needed might be closer at hand than any of us can know. And so part of me, I wonder about this very human, I wonder, and I hope in a non-judgmental way, about this very human inclination to leave one reality, to leave one world that is not working, and then to really struggle and feel conflicted as we're building this new world that we're trying to build. I'm not sure I have really anything more profound to say about that, except that I think it's an interesting dynamic, and I'm so glad that Archbishop Desmond Tutu named it. Second meditation. I call this one, where do you find yourself in the story you find yourself in? For this morning, I had the idea of basing the sermon largely around the Archbishop Desmond Tutu reading, Liberation is Costly. But there are other readings, I think just 2, dealing with Passover and the Exodus in our hymnal. And it's one of them I'd like to explore with you a little bit right now. It's number 631 in our hymnal. And so I'm going to have you go ahead and open it. I'm going to read it. We're not going to do another responsive reading because we've already inflicted that on you this morning. But I'm going to read it, and I invite you to read it along. I will say that it's interesting. This is from We have 3 readings in the hymnal from Congregation Beth El in Sudbury, Massachusetts, and I feel like there must be a story of how we wound up with 3 readings from a Jewish synagogue in Sudbury, Massachusetts in our hymnal, and I wish I knew that story, but that's another sermon too. So I'm going to read it, and I invite you to kind of feel and experience it. What sacrifices would we make for freedom today? What would we leave? How far would we go? How deeply would we look within ourselves? Our ancestors had no time to await the rising of the bread. Yet we, who have that time, what do we do to be worthy of our precious inheritance? We were slaves in Egypt, but now we are free. How easy it is for us to relive the days of our bondage as we sit in the warmth and comfort of our Seder. How much harder to relieve the pain of those who live in the bitterness of slavery today. One of the things that I find interesting about this reading is the way that it juxtaposes the voice of the reader with the characters of the Exodus story. It places the Exodus story in the past and says that we are now no longer in that story. We were slaves in Egypt, but now we are free. How easy it is for us to relive the days of bondage of our ancestors, how much harder to relieve the pain of those who live in the bitterness of slavery today. It's an interesting reading for a couple of different reasons. And one of them is that at the top, it begins with this, it declares a need to make a sacrifice. It includes a need to, what sacrifices would we make for freedom today? That there is something that we'll have to give up or do or leave behind in order for there to be freedom. And then at the end, it kind of assumes that freedom is ours, but it's just not universally shared in the world. And I want to pose that as sort of a question to you. Do you consider yourself in some ways unfree or lacking freedom today and in need of some sacrifice or change or revolution to find that freedom? Or do you find yourself a person with freedom who just wishes that freedom was expanded to more in the world? It's a question for you. My third meditation is to ask, what does liberation look like for us? These two readings side by side raise the question, what does liberation look like for us? Are we fundamentally a free and liberated people who just need to work to bring even more of the freedom that we enjoy to the rest of the world, especially to a category of people who we would call oppressed? In some ways we are that. Or are we fundamentally an unfree people, our own liberation denied by systems of oppression that restrict and deprive us as well as others? Might we even be unaware of the ways that we are lacking in freedom? Are we Pharaoh? When you read stories in the Bible, it can be a mistake to assume that you are to play the role of the hero, although that's the one that often we naturally want to play. Does this story teach us that we need to examine our own hard-heartedness, our own self-destructive stubbornness, in the ways that we may be complicit in the lack of freedom in our world? Although it has been a sentiment that's been rephrased many times, It was, I believe, the 19th century Jewish activist and poet Emma Lazarus who said, "Until we are free, we are none of us free. Until we are free, we are none of us free." What does our own liberation look like? I would say what we can learn about our own liberation is by listening deeply to what liberation sounds like when it's spoken all over the world, by all people, in all cultures. I think liberation looks like many things. It's a line, as Don said in the opening words, it's a line that is drawn to the civil rights movement, to the disability rights movement, to the gay rights movement, to people in the streets. In Israel last week, preserving democracy, to people the world over, calling for greater liberation and greater freedom. Until we are all free, we are none of us free. And so we should listen to the voices calling for freedom. And maybe not in our lifetime, but eventually we will reach that promised land. And we're going to close this morning with a hymn about reaching the promised land, or at least that's what I think it's about. It's in your teal hymnal. It's number 1018, "Come and Go With Me." And I invite us to rise and to sing it joyfully.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
The words for extinguishing the chalice are in your order of service. Please join me in saying them if you wish to do so. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Now let us thank all those who made this service worshipful this morning. Please be mindful of the clock. If you have children to pick up in RE, please wait till 10:30 to pick them up because our service is ending early. So please join us in singing Shalom. The words are in your order of service. As you are comfortable, please either hold hands with the person next to you or cross your arms over your heart.